All right, take two. Let me grab my new link for our Discord friends. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Should be back up and running now. Nope, it's not. God damn it. You got me? Are we all good? I don't know why it's not. I'm not getting any levels. If it's okay, then we can keep it moving, even though I'm not seeing any levels on my end. All right. Sorry about that, but we're off and running now. So officially, welcome to another episode of Facemask Fantasy. Back from a little vacation. Took last Thursday off. I was hiking in the mountains, but I'm back, ready for a few more ranking live streams this week, and we'll have some content coming out, or I'll have some content coming out over the course of this week. There's been a bit of a drop of news today regarding a big time name. So we'll get into that before we do the rankings. Today's rankings will be QBs 13 to 24. So for my Superflex crowd, those who play in the better of all types of formats for fantasy, you guys this will probably be one of a little bit more interest to you. The top 12 quarterback rankings, it fluctuates a little bit in that maybe 9 to 12 range, personal preference, situation, whatever have you. 13 to 24 is much more fluid. People's rankings are going to be different, a little more different. Most of the names are probably in there somewhere, but you're going to have other guys sneaking in that 22, 23, 24 range, which won't be the case for others. So we'll get to that. Should be a good conversation. But first, news did drop regarding the Saints' Alvin Kamara. Most anyone, especially Alvin Kamara dynasty managers, are well aware that there's been legal off the field situation to unfold as we get closer to training camp. We got a little bit of insight into that today. It's been reported. This is from Tom Pelissero on the NFL Network. Multiple other sources have already confirmed this as well. But Saints running back Alvin Kamara pleads no contest. I think he pleaded guilty officially to a misdemeanor charge from the incident in Las Vegas at the Pro Bowl back in February of last year in 2022. As a result, the criminal charge was dropped. So Kamara will do community service. He will pay a fine for I guess for the injuries resulting from the incident, for the alleged victim. But he avoids any type of a potential criminal issue as a result of this. This is significant. There were a lot of people that were concerned about Kamara's potential availability for the duration of the 2023 season. Some people thought he might miss the entire season as he goes through this legal process, and it's baked into his ADP. His current ADP on Underdog Fantasy is around 94, 95. So 9 or 10 rounds in, you can get a guy who, for essentially his entire career, has been an RB1. But the concern, of course, was that he was going to miss potentially extended time this year. So people were shying away from him. They were fading him. Jamal Williams was somebody who a lot of people were paying a little bit more attention to. The Saints drafted Kendre Miller in the draft for running back depth. So that at the time felt like it even further cemented that Kamara was going to face some type of potentially severe discipline from the league. He's still going to face a suspension, because the NFL will still suspend players who violate the code of conduct policy. He did that. But we're probably looking at somewhere now between, I would say, 4 and 6 games, as opposed to an 8, a 10, a 12 game suspension, one that possibly even trickles into, or, for the duration of the season. That's not going to be the case now. He's going to still face a penalty, but he's going to play this year. This is huge news. I would expect Kamara's redraft ADP to climb 20 spots, probably more, 30 spots or so, because now you're looking at what's expected to be, while still a penalty, not nearly as severe as one. So probably, and this is just pure speculation, this is not a report, don't quote me on this. This is just based off of past incidents and the result of them. We're probably looking at a 4 to 6 game suspension for Alvin Kamara, which means at worst, likely he's back week 7, week 8, maybe even a little bit sooner than that. And the Saints bye week, I think, is on the later side. I think it's around week, I want to say like week 11 is the Saints bye week. I'm double confirming that now. Let's see. Yeah. Oh man, I was spot on. Saints week 11 bye. So the bye week is not an early one. So it's not like he, that kind of gets like a free square, right? A free space over the course of the suspension where he misses a week where he wouldn't have played anyway. So you still have the week 11 bye to account for Kamara. But again, if he's back by week 6 and you're able to get him in the 5th round, that's probably where it settles. 5th or 6th round, probably the 5th round ish. Now that you know for sure that once we definitively know the suspension, that'll of course settle in his ADP. It's about to take a big jump. But I would expect at least today, if you're playing best ball, you're going to see him go 15, 20 spots higher than prior drafts, prior underdog drafts. So huge news for Alvin Kamara. I'll have something on this tomorrow where it kind of points specifically to it. But that is a significant development for people who have Kamara in Dynasty, and also people who bought him at a discount in underdog drafts this year. That's the big development for today. I'm not familiar with any others at this point. I think that was the biggest note to talk about. I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail in a video tomorrow. But today, like I said, we've got rankings. We've got quarterbacks 13 to 24 rankings for the Superflex crowd. On Thursday, we will do running back rankings 13 to 24. So we'll get the RB2s in there in here for this week as well. And then next week, we'll hit the wide receivers 1 to 12 on Tuesday, 13 to 24 on Thursday. Without further ado, let's break into these rankings. Quarterback 13. And just, I guess, a quick recap. The top 12 rankings that I listed out last week. You can go check that out on the channel. Quarterback 1, Jalen Hurts. Quarterback 2, Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes is QB3. I have Justin Fields as QB4. Joe Burrow as QB5. Lamar Jackson, QB6. Justin Herbert, QB7. Trevor Lawrence, QB8. I put Tua Tagovailoa, QB9. Deshaun Watson, QB10. Dak Prescott, QB11. Geno Smith, QB12. QB13. This is where it gets fun. Where I'm sure I don't know if I'll ruffle any feathers, but this is where it gets fun. At QB13, I have my first rookie in these rankings. Anthony Richardson of the Colts. I'm willing to roll the dice on him this year, despite the recent reports that he's potentially, the Colts, Jim Irsay has alluded to, maybe he gets work early, maybe he doesn't. There were whispers and rumblings that Gardner Minshew might start the season for the Colts. If he does, I don't care. He's not long for that job. You don't draft a quarterback in today's NFL, top 5 overall, and don't have him starting by some point of his rookie season. Not when you are in the situation like the Colts are, where it's a bit of a transition for them. They're not a Super Bowl contender right now. They have decent pieces on that team, but they're not a complete team just yet, and they're not as good as the Jacksonville Jaguars in their own division, who are ahead of them. So get your young guy the reps that he needs for two reasons. One, you fast track his development, and two, you can kind of get an early look and see what you got as you develop him on the fly. To get him ready for the seasons to come, because you're going to be battling with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars for the next decade. Richardson's got all the tools. 6'4", runs a 4.4 40, 4.43 officially. Decent weapons to work with. The offensive line for the Colts struggled last year. Some of that could probably be attributed to the terrible quarterback play. The team's season went in the tank relatively quickly last year. It was, by week 6 or 7, it was pretty obvious. Week 7 or 8, it was like, okay, I don't know if Matt Ryan necessarily has anything left. He didn't. The season spiraled out for the Colts. A lot of guys didn't play well as a result. Hence, they end up in the situation that they do, and they take Anthony Richardson fourth overall. The third quarterback taken, but the guy with the most fantasy upside. At least in year one. More than Bryce Young, more than CJ Stroud. Colts have a new head coach. Shane Steichen comes over. He was previously the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. The Eagles offense worked out pretty well last year with Jalen Hurts at the helm, and now Steichen gets to show what he can do as a head coach and a top play caller for Anthony Richardson as he begins his NFL career. The Colts do not have the talent along the offense that the Eagles do, so there's going to be growing pains. We're not expecting them to match the Eagles' production just because the offensive coordinator is now the Colts head coach, but the scheme is going to be installed over from Philly, which should help Anthony Richardson. It worked great for Jalen Hurts last year. You expect, everybody's favorite acronym in the NFL, the RPO. You probably expect a lot of those this year. You can lean on the run game with Jonathan Taylor. You've got a pretty good wide receiver to lean on in Michael Pittman. You have interesting players with Alec Pierce. They drafted Josh Downs. You kind of got a ragtag crew at tight end. Jelani Woods, I think, still headlines that. I believe Mo Alley Cox is still on the team, for whatever that's worth. So, you have some options there. They brought in Zach Moss in the trade for some backfield depth, whatever. The higher end pieces here, Taylor and Pittman, are the guys to lean on as far as reason to be potentially excited about Richardson's opportunity here. And of course, we expect Richardson to run. He did that a lot at Florida, and with 4.43 speed, especially as a rookie in the NFL, as he's finding his way, I think it's fair to say, in general, those guys early on in their career are more likely to lean on their legs than to sit in the pocket and wait for plays to develop. More likely. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but Richardson had been billed for the most part as kind of like a developmental project throughout the pre-draft process. Obviously, you feel strong enough about his tools and his potential ceiling for him to go top 5 overall. But that probably means he's going to run a decent amount on a Colts offense that currently is going through a transition. The weapons are good, not great. There's upside for more there. Jonathan Taylor, just 2 years ago, was the overall RB1. So you hope he can return to form, get over the injuries that hampered his season last year. None of them are long-term lingering concerns. Just a matter of something an offseason can help overcome as far from a time perspective. That should help the run game, the RPO game. Richardson and Taylor should be able to kind of rely on each other to make that successful. And you've got a pretty good top option in Michael Pittman to grow with, who's not that old as well, for Richardson to work with. The tools are there for a low-end QB1 season. I don't know if he necessarily has a higher ceiling than that for fantasy purposes. He'd have to overcome a lot of good quarterbacks from a production perspective and multiple guys who are more complete players, both as passers and runners right now. So I'm not exactly predicting that he cracks the top 6, but he's got low-end QB1 upside. I think that's more than fair to say. Again, as far as the potential reports that, Gardner Minshew might start week 1, I think those are rumors. I think that's just blowing smoke. I really think it's BS, to be completely honest with you. No disrespect to Gardner Minshew, but there's no future there from where the Colts are sitting. Your future, your right now and your future is in the hands of Anthony Richardson and his development. You get him on the field. Even if it comes to fruition that Gardner Minshew starts week 1, how long is that going to last? A couple weeks? Maybe. And even if it is the case, why would you do that? I think that's just off-season smoke. I'm not buying it. Anthony Richardson is my QB 13, and he's got plenty of upside and opportunity to crack the top 12. QB 14. And again, I do see a couple questions in the chat. Always willing to take those. So feel free to fire them off. It's not going to just me be sitting on a soapbox. Y'all know this by now. Happy to stop and talk about that. And Jordan Love did make my top 24, Alex. So I can talk about him later. He's on the lower end. Spoiler alert, but he did crack the top 24. So I'll get to that in a bit. QB 14. I grappled with this one. These next 3 or 4 guys are pretty interchangeable. It's pretty much just personal preference at this point. But I put Kirk Cousins as my QB 14. This is probably about his ceiling. Maybe he can crack the top 12 as the QB 11 or 12. Because he puts up good numbers in the passing game. Obviously, you're not really getting anything from Cousins as a runner, so that caps his upside. He's not a guy you're ever really going to rank higher than a spot like this. But I got Cousins as my QB 14. The best wide receiver in the NFL to throw the ball to. Topped 4,500 passing yards last year. Almost 30 touchdowns. He finished with 29 to 14 interceptions. So that's not great. Need fewer interceptions from Kirk. When you have a guy who's not a runner, you need him to be a highly efficient passer. To have confidence in him from a fantasy perspective. Kirk is a rock-solid QB2. If he's your QB1, you're probably in trouble. He just doesn't offer that much in the way of a ceiling. So, but, 4,500 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, that'll get it done, but those interceptions need to come down to under 10. That's just, if you are to rely on him in fantasy, they got to come down. The turnovers got to come down. But he's got Justin Jefferson to throw the ball to. It's TBD if year 1 of rookie Jordan Addison is better than the veteran Adam Thielen. That's TBD, but I do think it is a fair assumption. Thielen is older now. I think he's 33, 34. Has lost a step. Not as effective as he had been as recently as 2-3 years ago. So you ideally hope Jordan Addison is an upgrade there. The midseason acquisition of TJ Hawkinson was huge for the Vikings offense. It was huge for Hawkinson as well. You saw his production balloon up once he got traded to Minnesota. So another high-end option for Kirk Cousins to throw the ball to. Between Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison, you've got a pretty strong trio. Definitely a good top 2 with Jefferson and Hawkinson. Addison's unproven. He's a first-round pick. A former Biletnikoff winner at USC, or was he with Pittsburgh when he won that award? I think he was with Pittsburgh when he won that award before he transferred to USC. Nevertheless, he put up stellar numbers in college. You hope it translates to the NFL. Nothing is ever assured from that regard, but first-round pick in this day and age with a wide receiver, you expect production right away. That's just how the cookie crumbles these days. First round picks are no longer like developmental prospects with big ceilings. They're guys that you with big ceilings who need to play now for the most part. So he's going to get a starting opportunity right away. Probably has already leapfrogged KJ Osborne on the depth chart. I'm not going to believe any random reports in the offseason that potentially come out as KJ Osborne is running ahead of Jordan Addison. Yeah, okay, that'll be like for preseason. That's about it. Cousins has good weapons to throw to as long as Addison is able to provide some decent production. Doesn't inspire a ton as a runner, but he's got good weapons to throw the ball to. The Vikings should be in a battle for the NFC North this year, probably with the Detroit Lions. So they're not layups to win the NFC North. They should be in some battles this year. That should increase Cousins' opportunity to sling the rock. And this might be his last opportunity as a starter. I think he's in the last year of his deal, right? He's on a 1-year deal right now. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent next year as a what, 35-year-old? Yeah. He's got one more year with the Vikings before he becomes an unrestricted free agent at age 35. He'll be actually closer to 36 this time next year. This might be it for Cousins. And he has to know that in the back of his mind. Or he has to at least be thinking it could be it as far as him as a starter. So all bets are off. Time to sling it, man. Let's see if he can rise to the occasion. Because he's probably going to feel or be of the belief that he can still be a starter next year. Quarterbacks, we see 37, 38, 39-year-old quarterbacks all the time. He's going to feel like he still has an opportunity, whether it's with the Vikings or somewhere else. So it's kind of put up or shut up time for Kirk Cousins. Let's see if he can rise to the occasion. I can't rank him as a low-end QB1 because of the lack of rushing upside, but I can put him as a strong, safe floor play as a QB2. QB15. There's a little bit more upside here, and maybe he has earned the right to be here over Cousins. Like maybe I should have put this guy 14th over Cousins because he can run a little bit better. But there's some uncertainty around the offense, at least as far as the personnel goes. So I had to drop him to 15. That's Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. Jones can give you something on the ground that entices you from a fantasy perspective. That boosts his floor, absolutely. It boosts his floor and his ceiling. And so he's got upside to finish as a high-end QB2, low-end QB1. There's just questions. I have questions anyway about the personnel of the New York Giants. I know there's plenty of people, Giants fans maybe more specifically than others, who believe that the Giants are going to take a step forward this year. They believe in Brian Daboll, who looks like a good head coach, looks like he knows what he's doing, looks like a guy who belongs as far as the position that he holds. I'm just not sure about the offensive personnel. First of all, we're sitting here on July 11th, assuming Saquon Barkley is going to play this year. But the whispers are already coming out that he could sit out. He could sit out games in 2023. Do we automatically assume that's going to happen? No, because it's incredibly rare. But Saquon feels like he's earned more money than the Giants are willing to pay him, and now they're at a stalemate. And we as the fans are in a wait and see mode of what's going to happen. Can the Giants and Saquon come to some type of an agreement? If they can, great. Daniel Jones, I would probably put over Kirk Cousins a little bit more definitively if I knew Saquon was going to play, because let's be real, he's the real engine of that offense. I know Daniel Jones had a good season last year as far as protecting the ball, but what did he have? Like 13, 14 passing touchdowns last year? That's not gonna cut it. That's not enough. And I know that the Giants pass catchers, especially last year, leave a little bit to be desired. But again, that's another concern I have as far as how high do I put Daniel Jones in my rankings. They traded for Darren Waller this year. I think they flipped him for it was a third or a fourth round pick, something around there. So that's an upgrade for sure. Even though Daniel Bellinger flashed a little bit last year, they felt that they could upgrade at that position nonetheless. So they go out and get Darren Waller from the Raiders, who had an injury riddled season last year, but obviously they're hoping that Waller can bounce back. Waller himself is hoping he can bounce back. He's probably looking at this situation thinking, especially if Saquon's not there, I can lead this team in targets, and he probably should. Even if Saquon, even if and when, if and or when Saquon signs whatever deal that the Giants offer to him outside of the franchise tag, if that comes to fruition, even if Saquon reports and plays 17 games, Waller should lead this team in targets. So they do get an upgrade there. They added Paris Campbell in free agency, who remains an interesting name, even though he's now in his age 25 season. He's been an interesting name, quote unquote, for the past few seasons. Injuries hampered him for the first couple years of his career, and then last year he flashed a little bit, but bad quarterback play held the offense back. Now he goes to the Giants. There's been positive reports about Paris Campbell in OTAs. We'll see if, what he is able to bring to the table. They drafted Jalen Hyatt to go along with Isaiah Hodgins and Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. I might be missing a name or two of all the slot receivers that the Giants currently have on the roster. But that's the crew of wide receivers that Daniel Jones has to work with. So if Waller can stay healthy and Saquon comes to terms with the Giants, they come to a deal, they come to an agreement. Saquon's happy, the Giants are happy, all is good and peachy in New York. Daniel Jones gets a boost. I would put him over Kirk Cousins, and I might put him over Anthony Richardson even as like my highest QB2 with the best shot at sneaking into the QB1 conversation as a QB2. But I got him down a few spots or a couple of spots for now because there's just uncertainty about this offense. Because if it's in a worst case scenario, Saquon doesn't report, and Waller, he's in his advanced age, has dealt with injury riddled seasons before, including just last year. If Saquon doesn't report, if Waller's not able to stay healthy, I mean, now you're talking about who's he working with? Matt Breida and Evan Hall in the backfield, or is that who they drafted? And then again, the wide receivers I named: Paris Campbell, Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton. This is like a ragtag crew of like, okay, all right, wide receivers, but like, there's nobody that no disrespect, there's nobody that jumps out the page for you here. There's no names where it's like, that dude can carry you as a wide receiver. That dude can elevate the play of his quarterback. There's none of that, at least right now in the Giants offense. What you're hanging your hat on is Daboll, is the head coach, scheming up a creative offense that can maximize the talent or sort of lack thereof that the Giants have to work with from a pass catching perspective. The offensive line improved last year. Andrew Thomas took big steps forward as a left tackle. The rest of the line remains a question mark. Evan Neal, I know he was just a rookie last year, and you don't hold too much against rookies, but Evan Neal did not have a good season at right tackle. So they still have question marks along some pieces along the offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas. So while I have optimism for Daniel Jones from a fantasy perspective, especially because he can run, I have him at 15 because I have more questions today, right now, than answers about the Giants offense as a whole. QB 16. Again, this is another guy he could finish in the QB 14, QB 13 range. But he's going to have to put up big passing numbers to do it because, again, he's not a guy that you rely on with his legs. And there's questions about the offense. I've got Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. The question, of course, here is how effective can they be? Pretty much primarily by leaning on Amon-Ra St. Brown in the receiving game. Jamison Williams has been suspended for the first 6 games of the year, so he comes back week 7, or is it week 8? I can't remember what the Lions bye week is. But he comes back for, in the middle of the season for the stretch run. So that'll boost Goff once that happens. But of course, they traded TJ Hawkinson. They replace him in the draft with Sam Laporta, rookie tight end out of Iowa. Reportedly has been flashing in camp and OTAs. We'll see if he can do it. Training camp, preseason, and of course, obviously the regular season. We all know that it could be a steep learning curve at the tight end position. So we'll see if Laporta can give them anything, at least early on. They traded DeAndre Swift away after they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, 12th overall. So it could be a big-time check-down offense in Detroit between Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they, of course, bring David Montgomery in free agency. David Montgomery is also a viable pass catcher in his own right. So there are some names here, and I think at this point it's fair to say we expect big things from Gibbs. Did they trade up? Either way, they took him 12th overall. It's ridiculously high draft capital for a running back. They clearly feel there's something there from a talent perspective. So Gibbs should get peppered with targets, especially, Hawkinson's out of the picture. He's in Minnesota now, and we'll see if Sam Laporta can come along, or how quickly he can come along in the offense, but that probably means a lot of targets for Jahmyr Gibbs outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Other than that, they brought Marvin Jones back, I think, on a 1-year deal in free agency. He's like 34 years old at this point, but he's a warm body, so hopefully he can hold down the fort. I think they still have Josh Reynolds. Suffice to say, after Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's kind of bleak as far as the wide receivers, as far as the pass catchers go, until Jamison Williams comes back. And then, of course, we can't even sit here and definitively say, what is Jamison Williams? He missed his entire rookie season. He missed, the first 14 weeks of his rookie season, came back, had one big play, and otherwise was not a huge factor in the offense. So does he, hopefully he takes a step forward, but now we got to wait another 6 games for him to actually see the field. We can't even sit here and definitively say that how much does Jamison Williams elevate the Lions offense. We hope it's significantly. They spent significant draft capital on him last year. They clearly believe in him, but we got to wait 6 more weeks. So Goff's passing numbers could be a little weak to begin the season. So it could be kind of like a wait and see type of situation with him. But the upside is there as far as big passing numbers. Given that Amon-Ra is a top 12 wide receiver, we're expecting big things from Jahmyr Gibbs, and David Montgomery is a above average pass catcher at the running back position. Maybe that's even selling him a little bit short. He's a good pass catcher as a running back. It just could be a lot of check downs, maybe some low ADOT numbers for Jared Goff for at least the first 6 weeks of the season. If Laporta can come along maybe faster than expected, if Jamison Williams is able to come back after the suspension and light it up, he has to be as advertised. If he's as advertised, then he needs to light it up. He was like the 11th or 12th overall pick in the draft last year. If these things happen, Goff is in for a 4,500 plus yard season. But there are some factors, at least in the beginning of the year, that kind of hold him back. Hence why I have him as my QB 16. So I guess for the first 4 guys today, Anthony Richardson, QB 13. From a fantasy perspective, arrow's pointing up. 14's Kirk Cousins. Arrow is flatlined. It's just kind of whatever. I don't know if he's like an upside or a downside guy, but I would say he's more likely to get surpassed if the situations improve for guys right below him. Daniel Jones, 15. Tentatively, that arrow could go up, but we need Saquon Barkley on the Giants offense for that to happen. And then Jared Goff, same thing. Arrow is like sort of trending up, but we're going to probably have to be patient until Jameson Williams returns from suspension, and we'll see how quickly Sam Laporta progresses as a rookie. Those are my first four guys for QBs 13 to 16. QB 17. I don't know what to do with this guy, but I have no choice but to feel like there should be optimism here after an abysmal season last year. But I'm going to go back to the well because some factors have changed for the better. And that's Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. Let's ride. We all know what happened in Denver this past year. Nathaniel Hackett was a colossal disaster as a head coach. Russ at times himself looked done, almost looked cooked, looked absolutely terrible running that offense. Who is ultimately to blame? Probably some complete combination of both. The team lost also Javonte Williams early on in the season. The pass catchers are solid, but there are some question marks there. The reasons to be optimistic about Russ are twofold. One, they bring in Sean Payton. Sean Payton proved himself to be an offensive mastermind in New Orleans. Those offenses with the Saints regularly were at the top of the league under his tenure. Obviously, he had a Hall of Fame quarterback with Drew Brees, so that certainly helps things. But Payton's considered an offensive guru. He should make this team better. One, because of his track record, and two, because there's not really anywhere else to go but up for the Broncos because they pretty much hit rock bottom last year from an offensive perspective. The other reason to be in on Russ is now his ADP is completely depreciated. It's plummeted, and for good reason, right? He was a pick that you were making in 2022, 75 to 80 picks into the draft. Now you can regularly have him 110, 115 picks into a draft. Actually, it might be even cheaper than that. Let me double check this. I was wrong. Russ's ADP is 133. I mean, you can have him 12 rounds into a draft. As a QB2, that's not bad. I mean, that's a one quarterback ADP, so of course his superflex ADP is going to be higher than that. But I mean, it's all correlated, right? It's all relative. His value is down. His cost is much more bearable. And his situation has seemingly improved. He gets a better offensive play caller as head coach in Sean Payton. I think Jerry Jeudy is a receiver waiting to break out in this league. They drafted Marvin Mims in the second round, who I really like. Maybe not necessarily for this year, but long term, I like Marvin Mims. Courtland Sutton is still there. There were rumors that the Broncos were shopping their wide receivers this offseason. I have to imagine he was the guy that they were shopping, Sutton, because when Jerry Jeudy's on the field, Courtland Sutton pretty much becomes an afterthought. We'll see if Sean Payton can change that. I suppose it's possible. If he can rediscover Courtland Sutton, at least from earlier in his career when he was putting up stronger numbers, then this passing offense should be pretty good. They also have Greg Dulcich coming into his second season. He flashed as a rookie, especially on a bad offense. He looked pretty good. So hopefully in a better situation and better environment, he takes another step forward. And then, of course, they get Javonte Williams back in some way, shape, or form this year. I say that because obviously he ripped up his knee pretty good in week 4 or 5 of the season last year. He didn't just tear his ACL. He tore his MCL. He tore his LCL. He tore everything in his knee. He said he's feeling good. He's expected to be on track for training camp. How effective he'll be right away is yet to be determined, but if he's able to regain strength in the knee as the season progresses, that's another element to that offense that should only make it better. The pieces are there for Russ. The question, I guess, that is left now is, can Russ deliver? Or are we out of excuses for Russell Wilson? Russ can give you something on the ground. He's older now, so you're not exactly expecting the rushing numbers from when he was younger in Seattle. Um, but he can give you a little bit on the ground in a better offensive scheme. Maybe that boosts the floor a little bit. The weapons in Denver are good enough, I think. And the head coaching situation is as good as Russ could ask for as far as um, an offensive scheme that allows him to be more productive. There's question marks here, but I would say there's upside with Russ when you factor in his cost for 2023. It's significantly reduced, but the situation is better for him. Therefore, I am as my QB 17. Arrow is pointing up cautiously that he can outperform that ranking and his current ADP. At QB 18, I have Mr. Ayahuasca himself, Aaron Rodgers, now of the New York Jets. And maybe this is a little bit disrespectful having a guy like Aaron Rodgers all the way down at QB 18, but I mean, let's call a spade a spade. It was not a great season for Aaron Rodgers last year. Uh, 3,700 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I know he lost Davante Adams last year. The Packers didn't really do much of anything to replace him. They drafted Romeo Doubs in the 4th round, who had some flashes here and there, but we're talking about Davante Adams, one of the best receivers in the game. He lost that and was working with Alan Lazard. Christian Watson was very much a project into his rookie season. It wasn't until the second half of the year where he started to really catch on and catch fire. Alan Lazard, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. I think didn't they give Sammy Watkins a look for like a cup of coffee last year? I mean, of course, you had a decent backfield. You've got a great pass catching option in the backfield in Aaron Jones, but they weren't really getting anything at tight end. Robert Tonyan, didn't produce as expected. This offense was not that good. Rodgers had a bad year last year. Some of that can be attributed to the personnel around him, but we're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever do it. When you're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever do it, I don't care who he has to throw the football to. You expect that guy to elevate the offense. That's what we've come to expect from Aaron Rodgers. He shouldn't have to lean on one of the best wide receivers in the NFL to put up big numbers if you're a Hall of Fame quarterback. You should be able to deliver with pretty much anything as long as it resembles NFL talent. Alan Lazard, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, that should have been good enough for Rodgers to put up better numbers than what he did. And I'll throw in Aaron Jones as well, again, in upper echelon pass catching running back. And A.J. Dillon, the backup, he can catch the ball too. Not as efficiently or effectively as Aaron Jones, but he's not a slouch, even though he's a bigger guy. A.J. Dillon is a decent pass-catching running back for a backup running back. Rodgers' numbers should have been better. So I have him down at QB 18. Obviously, the situation improves in New York. Now he gets to throw the ball to Garrett Wilson. Alan Lazard follows Aaron Rodgers to New York. So does Randall Cobb, for whatever that's worth. Love Randall Cobb, but I mean, he's at the end of his career at this point. Tight ends are a slight improvement with Ty Conklin and CJ Uzoma. And then, of course, we'll have to see what happens with guys like veteran Corey Davis. Could be a cap casualty. And then, of course, the health of Breece Hall in the backfield, who tore his ACL midseason last year. It was a clean tear. It wasn't as significant of a tear as, say, a guy like Javonte Williams, but a tear is a tear. A ligament tear is a ligament tear, no matter how you slice it. So the jury's out on, what can Breece Hall bring to the table this season, especially when you factor in these rumors are just rumors, right? You believe whatever you want to believe. but apparently the Jets have been kicking the tires on Dalvin Cook. If they're kicking the tires on Dalvin Cook, to me that's like, okay, what's going on with Brees Hall? You know, so TBD on how much the backfield can help Rodgers. On top of this, and I know I didn't bring this up yet for the other quarterbacks, but we expect the Jets defense to be really good. So, like, how much are the Jets relying on Aaron Rodgers to carry them this year? I think they're hoping that they have a pretty complete team. And so maybe game script is not necessarily in favor of the passing game. That fact remains a possibility. Well, it's not a fact, but that scenario remains a possibility. And therefore, that could keep Rodgers' passing numbers down. Nevertheless, Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, they also bring in Mecole Hardman as a free agent. So I have to imagine he's going to contend with Corey Davis for that wide receiver 3 opportunity. I guess Randall Cobb is in the mix there as well. I'm not 100% sure. But with Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard, you feel pretty good about what Rodgers has to work with. But in his age 39 season, I mean, how much can we rely on Rodgers as a runner? And how much can we rely on him just, from the passing production after what we saw last year? Because it wasn't good. Things got better as Christian Watson developed. It took until midseason or so, which is not unexpected with rookies. Things got better then. So there's optimism for Aaron Rodgers, but because of the overall body of work from 2022, I can't put him higher than QB18. The pieces are there, and I guess, Nathaniel Hackett, who was a disaster with the Broncos, is a guy that Aaron Rodgers has worked with at length before during their time in Green Bay, and he speaks very highly of Hackett. He always has. Now they're reunited in New York. Maybe that rejuvenates Rodgers in some type of intangible way that we can't chart out on a graph or in a computer. So the pieces are there. I have him at QB18. Should be a safe QB2. But we saw what happened last year. I think there's plenty fair reason to be kind of concerned about Aaron Rodgers being able to return to that QB1 production, low-end QB1 production at the very least that you would expect from a guy who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer one day. If Brees Hall can come back healthy, boost the offense, that'll certainly help with scoring opportunities, but that remains to be seen as well. So a couple question marks as far as Aaron Rodgers and what we expect from him from a fantasy production perspective. I have met my QB18. What's up, Notorious? Good to see you, man. QB19. This one's a little dicey, I will admit. Because I don't even know if he's going to play this year. But I can't turn my eye away from the potential upside that he brings to the table. At QB19, I have Kyler Murray, which would suggest that I have him significantly higher than what his ADP currently indicates. And his current ADP indicates that he might not play this season, or he might not play at the very least a significant portion of this season. Everything's kind of working against him in that regard, right? We all expect the Cardinals to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. The defense needs a lot of work. The offense is, I guess, in some type of transition. They just released DeAndre Hopkins, not just, but earlier this offseason, they released DeAndre Hopkins. They're relying on Marquise Brown, who I do like. And then it's Greg Dortch. They drafted Michael Wilson in the 3rd round, who is a long project, a deep project, but they felt strongly enough about him to take him in the 3rd round. Um, who else is out there for the Arizona Cardinals? I mean, Trey McBride is at tight end. Could take a step forward in year two. And then, of course, you've got James Conner in the backfield. Uh, had a great season a couple of years ago. Had a decent season last year. They didn't really bring anybody else in, the Cardinals, into the backfield. So you expect James Conner to get a significant workload again this year. He can catch the ball as well, so that could help Kyler. But we're not expecting this to be a very good team. They're in a tough division where it's pretty clear that when healthy, the rest of the NFC West is head and shoulders above them. And so if the Cardinals get off to a bad start because Kyler's not ready to play yet, and it's week 6 or 7, and they're 1-5 or 1-6 or 0-6 or 0-7, I don't think this is it. It's hard to go. It's hard to go undefeated. It's hard to do two things in the NFL, right? It's hard to go undefeated and it's hard to go winless. Even the worst teams stumble into wins here and there. That's just the ebb and flow of the NFL. But this is not expected to be a good Cardinals team. If they've got one win or 2 wins or less through 7 or 8 weeks and Kyler hasn't played yet, now you're really looking at a situation where the Cardinals might just say, screw it. We're kicking this can to 2024. Kyler's getting shut down. We're going to have him, or Kyler's never going to get turned on to begin with. We're just going to keep him on the bench to recover from the torn ACL that he suffered late in the season last year. All of this is a possibility. And even if he does return, even if Kyler does get back on the field this year, given the injury that he suffered, you're probably not expecting a ton of that X factor rushing production. So when I say I have Kyler Murray as my QB19, I would put the arrow trending toward there's downside here. Make no mistake. This is a dicey, risky pick. And I understand if you want to completely steer clear of him for literally every reason I just listed. But Kyler is a proven high-end fantasy producer when healthy. Obviously, that's the caveat here. Kyler's not healthy, or we don't think he's healthy. He suffered that injury late in the season. I think it was like week 13 or 14 was when he tore his ACL. So not ideal for Kyler's potential availability for the start of the year. And he might not run that much, if at all, if he does get on the field. But when he plays, he's a top 5 quarterback historically for his early career for fantasy points per game. He's a big-time producer at the position. Now, again, a lot of that has to do with his ability to run. So he might not run a lot this year. He might not run at all. I get that there's lots of red flags. There's lots of risk. But I'm just looking at past production. I'm looking at the upside that Kyler does bring to the table. It's high risk. I wouldn't even say it's high reward, but I got to just go on merit here. It's got to be like a credibility thing because when Kyler's on the field, we've seen him produce for fantasy purposes at a high level. I understand if you don't want him. I understand if you want to fade him. But if you're giving me a guy like Kyler Murray, 170 picks into a 1-quarterback redraft league, I'm happy to take a chance on him as my QB2. Because if it doesn't work out, you spent peanuts to get him anyway, right? If you spent the 165th pick, the 170th pick, whatever it is, because that's how far he's sliding in 1-quarterback leagues. If you spend a high pick, or if you spend a low pick on him, it's not going to burn you because you spent such little minimal capital on him. So I got him as my QB19. There is downside. I would put an arrow trending down on Kyler because it's probably going to be until 2024 where we really see him return to form. Plus, he might not play this year at all anyway if the Cardinals are bad, which is, I think, to be expected. But opportunity cost plus what we've seen from him in the past, I'm willing to put him as my QB 19 for 2023. Notorious, I am covering QBs 13 to 24 today. If you want to check out my thoughts on Justin Fields, that live stream is posted on the channel. I think I have it timestamped. I have the QBs timestamped. I have Justin Fields as my QB4. So yeah, you can go back and listen to why I think he's not only a top 5 quarterback, but he's got QB1 overall upside. That is in a previous stream. I'm doing the QB2s today. And Justin Fields has been promoted from the QB2 rankings. He's a locked and loaded top 5 option. No doubt. 5 more quarterbacks to go. QBs 20 through 24 for my QB2 rankings. Again, I will do my RB2 rankings on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. The top 12 running backs, that live stream is also available on the channel. If you want to check that out, I'll do running backs 13 to 24 on Thursday. Be sure to tune in if you're available. QB 20. This is where it starts to get kind of blah, but a lot of people play in Superflex leagues, so you need to know who to nab as far as a potential value to elevate your team's starting lineup. I got Derek Carr of the now New Orleans Saints as my QB 20. It was not a good season for Derek Carr last year for the Raiders in 2022. 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Was benched at the end of the season when the Raiders were pretty much out of it. He didn't have Darren Waller, who was in and out of the lineup, mostly out of the lineup due to injuries. Hunter Renfrow also missed a lot of time last year. It was pretty much Davante Adams and Mac Hollins in the receiving game for the Raiders. And Carr's play suffered. He didn't have a great year. They ended up leaning on Josh Jacobs, who got almost 400 touches. They leaned on the run game. The passing game was not good. It was not efficient. Davante Adams got his, but that's because he's Davante Adams. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL until further notice, until he proves that he's not. But it wasn't enough to elevate Derek Carr's play. It led to him getting benched, so he missed several games. He probably would have eclipsed 4,000 passing yards as a formality, but it didn't happen. Now he moves on to New Orleans in what should be a better situation than the one he had in Vegas. We're not putting Chris Olave on Davante Adams level yet. He hasn't earned that quite yet as a second-year player. But Chris Olave is a guy that we have big expectations for. So that certainly elevates Carr's floor. The X factor here, the linchpin, of course, is Michael Thomas, who has had injury-riddled seasons for the past couple of years, past 3 seasons, I think. If Michael Thomas can give that team anything, that's going to boost Carr's floor. To be brutally honest, whether it's recency bias or not, I am not buying Michael Thomas this year at cost, or even if he falls. I know his ADP is already pretty low. It's around 100 in one quarterback leagues. Maybe it's a little higher than that, maybe in the 90s or so. But we haven't seen a healthy Michael Thomas since, 2019? 2020, he missed pretty much the entire season. 2021, he missed the entire season. 2022, he played, I think, half the year, but then he was eventually shut down midway through the season. It's been a struggle for Michael Thomas to stay on the field. I'm not holding my breath that changes as he continues to age. I have to imagine Olave has already surpassed him on the depth chart. If Michael Thomas can give that team anything, then, on a week-to-week basis, then Carr's floor is boosted. But it's kind of hard to feel good about that at this point. They do have an enticing guy, an enticing burner in Rashid Shaheed, who I have been drafting a ton, whether that burns me or not. His ADP is like 165-ish in one quarterback leagues. I think he's going to be that team's, if I don't believe in Michael Thomas because I'm concerned about his health, then I might as well believe in the next man up, who I think will be the guy who does start if and when Michael Thomas has to miss time. I like Rashid Shaheed as a burner. I mean, Carr is an upgrade from what the Saints had at quarterback last year. Even though he didn't have a great year last year, I think it's fair to say he's a better quarterback than Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston. So that should certainly help Rashid Shaheed, and it should help Carr as well. As long as these guys are healthy, it's going to be a better overall collection of talent than what he had last year in Vegas. Because Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow missed a ton of time. And he also gets, again, we talked about it at the top, Alvin Kamara is going to probably be back with this team sooner than a lot of people expected. We're still expecting a suspension, probably in the 4 to 6 game range, because he still violated the NFL's code of conduct policy. But we all know what Kamara brings to the table. He's not a traditional running back. He's a guy who can give you 70 plus receptions any given year. That boosts the floor of the quarterback. So if Kamara is able to come back by week 7, if it's sooner, great. We're not expecting it, but if he's able to come back by midseason, that boosts Derek Carr's floor. They also have, what do they have, 5 tight ends when you factor in that they list Taysom Hill as a tight end. They've got Taysom Hill. They've got Juwan Johnson. They got great news from Foster Moreau, who was originally diagnosed, I believe, with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He is cancer-free now, which is amazing, which is awesome. Big shout, big ups for Foster Moreau. Incredibly happy for him. Not 100% sure what he contributes this year because he was recovering from that, and also it's a new team, but it is the same quarterback, right? He follows Carr from Vegas to New Orleans, so there's some familiarity there. And who's the guy I'm missing? Who's the tight end that I'm missing from New Orleans? There's a name I'm missing. Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill. Isn't there another guy other than Foster Moreau? Am I terribly blanking? Maybe not. Maybe it's just those 2 guys. Yeah. So 3 different tight ends that the Saints can turn to. Definitely 2, but possibly 3 if Foster Moreau is able to, return to form or get back, get up to speed from an NFL availability perspective after having to literally fight cancer this offseason. So between those tight ends, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara coming back sooner than probably most people expected. I have Carr as my QB 20. The onus is on him. This ranking can, of course, go higher. And I guess I would give him a slight arrow up. I would have him trending slightly up. But he didn't play well last year. Need to see him kind of bounce back. Hence why I have him at QB 20. But the pieces are now there in place for Carr to have a much better season than he did in 2022. QB 21, we got a lot of old guys here, but we're giving them one last shot. QB 21, I have Matthew Stafford of the LA Rams. Stafford is in his age 35 season, and he has suffered a million injuries dating back to his time with the Lions. I think he only played in 10 games last year. He was, again, injuries kept him off the field. He didn't have a good year when he was on the field. 2,000, almost 2,100 passing yards, just under that. 10 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Outside of continuing to pepper Cooper Kupp with targets, and Tyler Higbee got his as well, it was not a good year for Stafford for the games that he did play. But he's reportedly back. He's reportedly healthy. The Rams didn't really do anything outside of drafting Stetson Bennett, I think in the 4th or 5th round. He's only a couple of years younger than Matthew Stafford as a rookie. Jokes aside, The Rams are running it back one more time with Stafford, with this offense. Sean McVay is still there as a head coach, so you have to believe in the offense from a play calling perspective. He still has one of the best wide receivers to throw the ball to in Cooper Kupp. You could make an argument that he's still the best receiver in the NFL because he literally just 2 years ago put up the best statistical season that we've ever seen at the position. After that, it's a kind of like, all right, we'll wait and see. I guess the wide receiver 2 is Van Jefferson. Tyler Higbee is still there. Nice option at tight end for Stafford to rely on. They drafted, who'd they draft? I'm blanking. The wide receiver depth is kind of thin for Stafford after Cooper Kupp, but Cooper Kupp is that dude to the point where he elevates his quarterback to be a low-end QB2 regardless of everybody else around him. So I guess it speaks more to like how awesome Kupp is than it how much you believe in Matthew Stafford. But he is a veteran who's put up big numbers before. You can believe in Stafford as an individual player just based on what he's done in this league. He is older. The injuries have accumulated. That is a concern. Obviously, you're not going to put him higher than this QB20 range. I have him at QB21. But the environment remains good enough. Sean McVay as a head coach. Cooper Kupp as a top weapon to throw the ball to. Tyler Higbee as a strong option at tight end to throw the ball to. I like Cam Akers in the backfield. He had a tumultuous start to the season last year, but he came on pretty strong toward the end of the season. Now, of course, the Rams were out of it at that point. But we've seen enough flashes from Akers where you feel like, okay, he can help the offense more than he potentially hurts it. The question for Stafford is health. If he's available, the passing numbers should be there at the end of the day. The built-in risk, of course, is an off-injured, aging quarterback gets injured again. That's the risk you run, with these older quarterbacks. But his cost is severely depreciated. You don't have to spend that much to get him. There's risk. I wouldn't say it's low risk, but it's minimal risk compared to the cost. You can cut ties relatively easily if it doesn't work out. Matthew Stafford, QB21, going into the 2023 season. What's going on, Theo? Good to see you. I might check out the All-Star game. I'm not big. I don't really care for All-Star games, and that spans all sports. Obviously, I don't watch the Pro Bowl. At this point, I don't know anybody who does. Even the biggest diehards are like, yeah, I'm not watching that. I don't care about the NHL All-Star game. I don't really care about the NBA All-Star game. I might tune into the MLB All-Star game just because it's like the thing that's on tonight. But it's probably going to be in the background more than it's in the foreground. Bringing it home. I have this guy again. It's sort of similar to Kyler. I have him higher in my rankings than I imagine most people do. And it's certainly dicey, but at this point, I mean, you're talking about we're at QB22 from a fantasy ranking perspective. It's going to be a little volatile at this point. It's going to be a little dicey, but I'm willing to roll the dice based on what we saw not last year, but 2 years ago. Mac Jones of the New England Patriots is my QB22. Over other younger guys like Jordan Love and Kenny Pickett and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Sam Howell. I have Mac Jones as my QB22. His cost is essentially zero in redraft leagues. Now he'll get drafted in superflex leagues, of course, but in one quarterback leagues, he's likely to go undrafted. He should go undrafted in one quarterback leagues. But in superflex leagues, I like him as a roll of the dice because he won't cost you much of anything relative to the cost of the other quarterbacks. And you should be able to load up on some decent talent at other positions before you grab him. Maybe you probably want him more as your QB3, but I do have him ranked as a QB2 for what it's worth. Last year was about as forgettable as it gets. Less than 3,000 passing yards, only 14 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Missed a game due to injury, or did he miss 2 games? He might have missed like a game and a half due to injury. So the numbers maybe are a little bit better if he plays all 17. Nevertheless, the reports are that Mac Jones remains the clear-cut guy for New England. There were like super early offseason whispers that there could be a quarterback competition in New England. Those have recently been squashed. Mac Jones is apparently the clear-cut guy for the Patriots atop the depth chart. And I have no reason to believe that that's not anything other than the truth. His rookie season was pretty good. He almost threw for 4,000 yards, 3,800, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Those aren't spectacular numbers. Those numbers don't wow you. But as a rookie on an offense that was like not that impressive from a personnel perspective, not bad. Not too bad. Gone is Jacoby Myers. Myers moves on to Las Vegas. They bring in Juju Smith-Schuster. I'll be honest, I'm not crazy about that. As far as from a Mac Jones perspective, apparently Juju is still nursing a knee injury that he suffered last year. And now he's learning yet another playbook for the third time in 3 years. So I'm not crazy about Juju, but they do bring him in. They still have a second-year player in Tyquan Thornton. We'll see what he can give you. They re-upped with Devontae Parker and what was maybe the most unexpected contract extension of the past several years, but they did it. So you still have Devontae Parker, who is a veteran. So I guess that helps. They bring in Mike Gesicki, who that's the signing I like. Mike Gesicki's not flashy. He's not great. He's not going to crack a top 12 tight end ranking. He'll crack a top 24 ranking here and there. But he can be a bit of a vertical guy from the tight end position. We saw that with the Miami Dolphins before they traded for Tyreek Hill last year. Mike Gesicki's yards per catch is not bad. He's the addition that I actually kind of sneaky like for this offense. They still have Hunter Henry. They traded Jonnu Smith to Atlanta, but they still have Hunter Henry. Has been a pretty decent tight end over the course of his career. And then they have a big-time pass-catching option in the backfield in Ramondre Stevenson. Forgive me if I'm forgetting anybody. They got Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker. Obviously, none of the, that collection of talent doesn't scream out at you. But again, we're talking about the bargain shopping for quarterbacks here in Superflex leagues. So take what you get. The big reason I am more in on Mac Jones is the Patriots aren't doing any stupid crap with their coaching staff this year. Last year, Matt Patricia, a career defensive guy, was the team's offensive coordinator. And the offense was awful. This year, they brought Bill O'Brien back. And say what you want about Bill O'Brien. Obviously, the tenure in Houston ended horrifically. But Bill O'Brien has a decent pedigree on offense as an offensive coordinator, as an offensive play caller. His previous tenure with New England, obviously that was with Tom Brady, and he had some time with Alabama as well. So he's got the chops, I think, at least to be an upgrade over what the Patriots had from an offensive coaching perspective in 2022. That's why I have a little bit more optimism about Mac Jones. I think there's more stability around him as a whole, and I think that'll help him to rediscover some of the success that he had as a rookie, and as a result, put up numbers closer to that than what he did in 2022. But everybody's got recency bias from his 2022 season, and his ADP is like 200 picks in a one quarterback redraft league. Jordan Love, Kenny Pickett, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Sam Howell, all of these guys are getting drafted over Mac Jones. Desmond Ridder, he's another guy I forgot to mention. All these dudes are getting drafted over Mac Jones. From a fantasy production perspective, I like Mac Jones over all of them, at least for this year. I think the touchdowns can get closer to 25. I think that, Interceptions can, as long as they're in the 10 range, the numbers should be there at the end of the day for Mac Jones to put up viable QB2 numbers. If you can draft him in a Superflex league as your QB3, I think you'll be sitting pretty as far as your quarterback depth for the 2023 season. I have Mac Jones's arrow trending up. I'm not going to rank him any higher than a guy who could finish as a top 20 quarterback, but I think he can blow his ADP out of the water. I have him as my QB22 for the 2023 season. I think there are multiple guys getting drafted ahead of him who shouldn't be. Last two, bringing us home. My QB23, this is kind of at the point now where the guys who are on these lists are the guys who I feel like they're the low end QB2s because we know that they have the job. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, but a starter is a starter nonetheless. And these next two guys just don't really have any other competition that you really look down the depth chart and worry about. I have Jordan Love as my QB23 for the Green Bay Packers. Again, he makes this list because he's a clear-cut starter and there's not a guy, breathing down his neck on the depth chart. The reason I have Jordan Love over guys like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud is just that it's historically difficult for rookie quarterbacks who don't have super high-end, rushing upside. It's hard for them to deliver from a fantasy perspective. 2 years from now, maybe even as soon as next year, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud are going to be ranked ahead of guys like Mac Jones and Jordan Love and Kenny Pickett, and probably also guys like Derek Carr and even Aaron Rodgers as well. But for now, I do have those guys down the list a little bit. Those offenses are very much a work in progress. I can't put those guys there yet. Love at least has a couple of years as an NFL, I'm not going to say veteran, but he's got 2 or 3 years of experience at least sitting behind Aaron Rodgers and getting an opportunity to learn. So that's, I guess, kind of why I give him the nod here. And I would say his supporting cast is slightly better than what those two rookies have in Carolina and Houston, respectively. Christian Watson balled out last year in the second half of the season, so you expect him to take another step forward. Romeo Doubs flashed last year. They still have, again, an upper echelon pass-catching running back in Aaron Jones. They drafted a project at tight end in Luke Musgrave, but he projects well as a freak athlete. He's probably going to need some significant seasoning before he actually starts to contribute from a statistical perspective. And then, of course, they also drafted Jaden Reed, I think in the second round. So they gave him pretty good draft capital. And then, of course, A.J. Dillon, again, not too shabby of a pass catcher in his own right out of the backfield. The collection of talent around Jordan Love should be enough for him to finish as a low-end QB2. The question, of course, is, can Jordan Love cut it as a starting quarterback in the NFL? We don't know that. Nobody can sit here definitively and say that he can. Also, nobody can sit here and definitively say that he can't. There's not enough of a sample size to determine one way or another. Nevertheless, the supporting cast is strong enough where I'm willing to rank Jordan Love as a low-end QB2, QB23 overall. I don't expect the Packers to have a great season this year. So if they're trailing in games, that's positive game script for Jordan Love. You don't need him to be good. You just need him to be throwing. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and then in the backfield, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon should be good enough to elevate Jordan Love to a low-end QB2 finish at bare minimum. What's going on, Nemo? Good to see you. Appreciate everybody coming in and stopping by today. Again, one more time, I got my RB 13 to 24 rankings on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. So we'll get to the running backs later this week. And then Alex, just to wrap up your question about trading Dalton Kincaid for Jordan Love. If that's, I think that's that super flex team. That's fine. in Superflex, you want to take flyers on quarterbacks. You just want to take shots on young quarterbacks. It's a decent gamble that's worth taking. Obviously Kincaid, first round draft capital, goes to the Bills, is going to be catching passes from Josh Allen for at least the next 4 years. So his long-term upside projects to be good. But I'm okay taking a shot on a quarterback, even if it's a guy that you don't project to be anything more than a middling QB2 in a super flex league. I'm okay with rolling those dice. I can't sit here and definitively say that there's a ton of upside with Jordan Love, but he's the clear-cut guy for at least the 2023 season for the Packers. I think it's worth the risk. I just wouldn't expect the world. The pieces are there for him to have a decent, maybe not exactly great statistical season. But we'll see, because we don't have a sample size on Jordan Love yet to determine one way or another if he's the guy. So roll the dice. If Jordan Love finishes as the QB 16 or 17, or QB 16, 17, 18, then that's a win. Right? Then that's probably a win. Is it out of the realm of possibility? No. Could happen. We'll officially get to see what Matt LaFleur is made of as a play caller without Aaron Rodgers for the first time as Packers head coach. So it's going to be an interesting year in Green Bay as far as how, ultimately what we determine from an expectation perspective. My final QB2 that cracks the top 24 is very much of the Jordan Love mold. He's no longer a rookie. There's nobody really behind him that you expect to really take his job. I don't know that that's necessarily a ringing endorsement, but at least he's the guy, and the pieces around him are strong enough to give him the last spot in the QB 13 to 24 rankings. My final ranked QB2 going into the 2023 season is Kenny Pickett of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wasn't a good year for Pittsburgh on the whole last year, at least relative to the expectations that the Steelers are used to. Pickett struggled in the first half of the season, picked up a concussion. Was that like week 5 or 6? So we did have to miss a game. And the team struggled as a whole, but they got better as the season went on. I think from weeks 9 to 18, the Steelers were a top 10 offense from a statistical perspective. So they improved. They got better as the year went on. The numbers weren't necessarily there for Pickett, though, in the end. Just over 2,400 passing yards, 2,404 to be exact, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Obviously, that's not good. Those are pretty bad numbers. The offensive line wasn't good. The team couldn't really rely on Najee Harris last year. He did not have a good season. He did not have a good analytical season. He looked like a plotter more than anything else. But we have to remember Najee Harris was injured coming into training camp. Have to imagine he never really was able to shake that off over the course of the season. He was getting usurped, especially in the second half of the year, for Jaylen Warren. Now he comes into this offseason healthy. This is a big year for Najee Harris. Even though he was a first-round pick, Jaylen Warren looked like the better running back for Pittsburgh last year. but they drafted him in the first round a couple of years ago. You expect him to get some decent volume. Um, and if he's coming into the season healthy, which he didn't last year, then that should help the offense. Obviously, you've got Deontay Johnson and George Pickens on the outside. I like both of those guys. Y'all should already know, I love Deontay Johnson. You should be drafting the hell out of him this year. His ADP is in like the 6th round. Go get him. He scored 0 touchdowns last year. That's a statistical anomaly. There's no way that happens again in 2023. There's just no way. As a starting wide receiver in the NFL, a good starting wide receiver in the NFL, Deontay Johnson, I think, had almost 150 targets last year, 0 touchdowns. That's an outlier. That should never happen. I think he bounces back nicely this year, even if he catches 4 touchdowns. If he gets 150 targets again, he's going to blow his ADP out of the water. You should be drafting Deontay Johnson. But I'm fine with George Pickens as well. 52 catches, 800 yards. Again, only 4 touchdowns. You obviously want to see 5 or 6. I don't want to get too greedy, but if he can get 6 or 7, now you're talking about a guy who should threaten to finish as a wide receiver 2 on the season. And he showed a knack for some spectacular catches. Pickens did. Still have Pat Freiermuth. In his 3rd season, he should take another step forward. He's an upper echelon, should be a top 10 tight end from a statistical perspective. The pieces are there for Kenny Pickett, and they upgraded along the offensive line. They addressed it in the draft with their 1st round pick. The offensive line it's tough for rookies to really have, a strong impact right away, but the offensive line has been a bugaboo for the Steelers for a couple of years now. I got to imagine there's nowhere to go but up at this point. So the offensive line play should be better. The wide receivers are good. Jaylen Warren proved to be a spark plug as a change of pace running back. And Pickett himself can run. Pickett can run a little bit. So that obviously is that fantasy football X factor. That can elevate his finish and his, week-to-week production. That could lead to a slightly better finish than QB24 overall. I'm sure there are people who have guys like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud over Kenny Pickett, maybe even other guys like Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder. I get it. I understand. But I'm going to rely on the fact that he's now going into his 2nd full season as the starter. The weapons there are pretty good. The results from the second half of the season indicate that progression happened last year. Again, the Steelers finished as a top 10 statistical offense for the second half of the season. I think there was some growth, whether, maybe it didn't show up in the numbers, but the stats are there to go look at the end of the day. They improved from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. If Pickett's able to take another second-year step, this offense should have more scoring opportunities, should lead to more than 7 passing touchdowns in 2023 with more seasoning as a starter, and you just expect more scoring opportunities as a result. It's dicey. It's kind of uninspiring, unexciting. I don't know what Kenny Pickett's long-term future is in this league. There are certainly question marks around that, but the second-year seasoning is big. He's got that NFL experience now under his belt. The weapons are good around him. The supporting cast is good. It's good enough for Pickett to deliver maybe not a spectacular season, but a good enough season to finish as a low-end QB2 when you factor in that the Steelers had a strong offensive finish to the 2022 season. So I have Pickett ahead of the rookies. I have him ahead of guys like Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell. I think he can get it done as a low-end QB2. And again, when you factor in his cost, which is dirt cheap, You can have him 175 picks into a 1 QB redraft league. Obviously, correlate that for Superflex, but it's all relative. Even in Superflex leagues, relative to the other quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett is going to be about as dirt cheap as they come, knowing that he is the clear-cut starter for the at least the duration of this season. It's not exciting. There's probably people who don't have him in their top 24 rankings, and that's fine. But I'm willing to roll the dice on him taking a step forward in his second year with the weapons that he has on that offense. That wraps up my QB2 rankings. A real fast, speed round to go through it again for anybody who missed it off the top. QB13 is Anthony Richardson. Arrows trending up. QB14 is Kirk Cousins. Arrows flatlined. 15 is Daniel Jones. It could cautiously go up, but we got to see what happens with Saquon Barkley. And then, of course, the health of Darren Waller is going to be key. 16 is Jared Goff. Gets a little bit of a boost, ideally, if Jameson Williams comes back and is able to put up big numbers, and if Sam Laporta is on the fast track from a development perspective. Russell Wilson at QB 17. Arrow is cautiously trending up with improved surroundings from 2022. QB 18 is Aaron Rodgers. Flatlined Arrow, neither up nor down, but I'm not crazy about it. QB 19 is Kyler Murray with a clear downside of the concern that he doesn't even play this year. But I'm willing to roll the dice on the severely reduced cost. Derek Carr, QB 20. Arrow is tentatively up, potentially, if Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. If Michael Thomas can stay on the field longer than he has the past few years, and if Alvin Kamara is able to come, if he doesn't get slapped with a significant suspension and is able to come back closer to the beginning, while we're still in the first half of the season as opposed to the second half of the season. Matthew Stafford, QB 21. Arrow's kind of, I would say, kind of down, but out of a respect of what he's done in the past, I'll give him QB 21. QB 22 is Mac Jones. Tentatively, the Arrow is up, but that's just because his cost is so low. But his situation should be better this year compared to last year. QB 23 is Jordan Love. QB 24 is Kenny Pickett. I'll keep it stagnant for now on both of those guys. I'm not super endorsing either, but relative to cost, I feel okay taking a flyer on them. They're pretty cheap for Superflex leagues. And that'll do it for the QB 24 rankings. I'll be sure to timestamp this retroactively for anybody who sees this at another time. Crumply heads, real quick. Mark Andrews and Sky Moore for Devontae Smith and Trey McBride. I guess it's fair. In tight end premium, I'd prefer to have Andrews. If it's not tight end premium, I guess it's fair. Devontae Smith looks like a wide receiver one for the foreseeable future. Sky Moore and Trey McBride are both dart throws, but Sky Moore's projection, I think right now today is significantly better than Trey McBride's. I guess I tentatively would prefer to have Mark Andrews and Sky Moore. I love Devontae Smith. He's got top 10 upside at the wide receiver position any given year, but Trey McBride is a wait and see on what's going to be a bad offense. Sky Moore is a wait and see, but with a great opportunity on what we expect to be one of the best offenses. And Mark Andrews is a top 2 tight end, even though last year wasn't spectacular by his standards. I'll take Mark Andrews and Sky Moore. We're at the end of the chat, so I think that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys all for coming in and hanging out. Appreciate y'all. Sorry about the technical difficulties a little earlier, but we got it squared away, thankfully. I gotta make sure my setup is correct moving forward, but I think we're good. I will be back on Thursday for my RB 13 to 24 rankings. Be sure to tune in 6 p.m. Eastern if you guys are available. That'll do it for today. Thanks, everybody.